Alright guys, Murph's here, and today I want to talk about this. My previously Maverick 88 into my 50 state legal truck gun. Now, I know we're talking about this, we will talk about a little bit of history, but the Maverick 88 is not a terribly historic firearm. So, the company is actually out of Eagle Pass, Texas, and is now a subsidiary of Mossberg Shotguns, which the interesting thing about the Maverick 88 is that it is basically the budget line of Mossberg shotguns. And now that's not to say that Mossberg shotguns are expensive as much as it is to say that Maverick 88 shotguns are incredibly cheap. They're under $200 generally. Now, you can get the Maverick in a couple different configurations. There's a sporting model with a 28-inch barrel, there's a defensive model with an 18 or a 20-inch barrel, and then there's also the slug gun with a 24-inch rifle barrel. Now originally that's what this particular shotgun was. As you can see here, I still have the 24-inch rifle barrel complete with rifled sights. Now I bought it on sale and decided that I was going to use it to inspire a shotgun build of some sort, and ultimately what I decided upon was a 50 states legal truck gun. Now, what does that mean exactly? And I talked about this a little bit in my truck gun concepts video, which if you guys are interested in my truck guns, go ahead and check that out. And the idea was that I would have something that, even if I traveled all the way across the United States, which I frequently do, or semi-frequently do, I guess I should say, I haven't done it in a while, but I would have a shotgun, or I'd have a weapon system that I could take with me that would not necessarily be subject to local laws. Now, in general, guys, whenever we're talking about traveling in between states and all that kind of stuff, you really have to be on top of your local laws, or those local laws, if you're going to be taking firearms with you. Making sure, at the very least, that your CCW permit is legal or is recognized by that state, what different types of CCW type restrictions they have, all those types of things. And if you're going to take long guns, which generally anytime I am outside of my immediate surroundings, my immediate area, I take a long gun because I'm going into the unknown, you're definitely going to want to be up on top of your laws. Now, already concealed carry laws vary, right? And what constitutes concealed carry varies quite wildly between different states. Once you get into taking long guns with you, what is legal in one state most definitely might get you in jail in another. And if you're going to be traveling around and have the potential to run into law enforcement, which does happen from time to time, be it speeding or any other types of acts, you need to make sure you're being above board with whatever it is that you're doing with firearms. We only get to call ourselves legal gun owners as long as we're behaving in a legal manner, and that's regardless of how it is that you feel about gun laws and all that kind of stuff. If you want to stay on the right side of the law, you gotta play the game. So, with that being the case, I started looking into what it was that would be important for me to be able to have a 50 states legal gun. Now, shotguns, for the most part, don't have as many restrictions, though there are some places that do have restrictions on shotguns. Of course, we're getting into the much more restrictive gun states to begin with, but there are restrictions on like magazine capacity and all that kind of stuff in some states. So that's kind of what drove me towards this and a lot of the features that I've picked out, as well as kind of my own personal background in accessorizing weapon systems to begin with. So with that being the case, let's go ahead and start talking about this particular shotgun. Now, I started off with getting rid of the 24-inch barrel. Keep in mind, if I didn't mention already, this is a 12-gauge chambered shotgun. It is chambered for 3-inch shells. I wound up going with an 18-inch cylinder bore Mossberg barrel because Maverick 88 shotguns will work with most Mossberg parts. Now, as we can see here, I do have a bead there, which at this point I'm really not using anymore because I got all this other stuff hung off of it, but I can still pick up my bead underneath all this stuff if I needed to use it as a backup sighting system. Now, coming down to our magazine here, now we can see that this is actually one of the areas where this shotgun differs from a Mossberg Model 500, and that is how the barrel links up with the magazine tube. This is not necessarily adaptable to extended magazine tubes and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of unfortunate, but it works out in this case because for a truck shotgun, or a truck gun in general, I like a more compact form factor. And with shotguns, that's kind of difficult to do. They're very space-intensive weapon systems. So being limited to the 5-round capacity of the shotgun is not necessarily an inhibition in this case. Now, as we can see here, I have a Surefire M600 Scout Light mounted on a Picatinny rail. This is a Picatinny accessible, try to bring this around to show you guys. This is a Picatinny accessible vent rib that I have attached here. Runs all the way down to the receiver. It originally had 2 Picatinny rails on the front. I removed one to try to save a little bit of weight because this wound up being kind of a heavy shotgun as it is. I'm running clicky caps as usual. As you guys know, if you've been watching the channel for a little while, I'm not a big fan of pressure pads for 2 reasons. 1, negligent discharges of light, and 2, sustainability of the system, because those wires and stuff like that coming out of the back of this, they can have a tendency to fray or get damaged and all that kind of stuff, and then your light doesn't work as effectively. So I prefer to run clicky caps whenever I can. Now, coming back to our Fore stock here. So I replaced the original stock Fore stock in order to go with something that had rails on it so that I could attach this vertical grip. I did want to have a vertical grip equipped shotgun so that I could more easily control this if fired from the collapsed position. It gives me something in order to be able to kind of press and pull with in order to be able to stabilize the shotgun. You guys ever see those videos of people shooting pistol grip shotguns and they jump out of their hands? It's because they're not able, or they aren't actively applying the forces to be able to lock it into place. Now, this Fore stock also originally came with Picatinny rails on it. And I wound up taking them off because I had these up here on this vent rib, and I wanted to run these instead of on the Fore stock. Now, this is entirely a pure preference type thing right here. I personally want my light system to be stable on the weapon system. I don't want it to move at all. And that's just purely based off of my experience with setting up AR-15s and all that kind of stuff. I can completely understand somebody wanting their light run off the Fore stock. It's just not for me. However, I still wanted to have the possibility in case for some reason this didn't work out, be it because I had an actual failure on the barrel shroud itself, or because for some reason it didn't work the way that I saw in my head. I want to make sure that I had the opportunities. Now, moving forward, I'll probably actually wind up at some point replacing this with a dedicated pistol grip Fore stock, because this wound up being a lot of extra stuff. Now, the vertical grip that I'm using here actually used to be a grip pod. This is one of several grip pods that I've cut down for my purposes for a couple reasons. One, I really don't care for grip pods. It's a whole lot of extra weight and all that kind of stuff, and it's not that great of a bipod. Honestly, I'd much prefer to utilize it as a vertical grip. But if I'm going to utilize it as a vertical grip anyway, I might as well not have the additional accoutrement that I'm not even going that are just added weight at that point. So I've taken a couple of these that I had lying around. I had no real money invested in them, so I went ahead and trimmed them down to usable lengths on whatever weapon system that I have them set up on, and that's what I've been running with. Now, originally, I had a Knight's Armament vertical grip on this particular shotgun, and it broke off the first time I ran buckshot through it. So after that, one of the things that appealed to me about the grip pod in this case was that the grip pod has this very hefty mating surface right here that really clamps on, and this has had 0 issues. It hasn't even begun to act like it's going to break off. So I swapped that out there. As we can see here, I have a sling attachment run off of the Picatinny rail here. This is from Trinity Force. This was the first of 2 Trinity Force products that I purchased, and it'll probably be the last time that I really work with their products. So this is set up for both HK type sling connection as well as QD. I have the QD set up here. First off, I had an issue with a 45 degree offset that I got from Trinity Force on a different build. And in a market that's flooded with all kinds of different manufacturers for accessories for different types of tactical weapon systems, I don't have to buy something that I'm not 100% in love with. And when that 45 degree offset broke inside of a plastic case, I decided that I was done with those. Now, for the moment, I'll keep running this one because it has not broken yet. However, one of my complaints right now is that I have this additional sling loop over on this side, which just looks like a snag point whenever I evaluate this, especially since I'm not using it. It serves no real purpose except to snag onto things. So for now, I'm leaving it where it's at in case I want to take this sling setup off and put it onto something else. But the moment it catches on something, literally anything, as soon as it causes me even the most minor of inconveniences, I'm dremeling that off. So stay tuned for that, I guess. Now, I'm also running a cheap nylon sling because I have one lying around, so why not? All right, now, coming back to our receiver section here. So I have a Crossfire 2 MOA red dot from Vortex setting up on here. I love red dots for close range type stuff, as well as being able to push them out a little bit farther. I consider them to be very useful optics, and on a shotgun, I consider them to be absolutely perfect. So, especially for the ranges that I'm expecting to use this out, I don't conceivably expect myself to engage with this shotgun beyond 100 yards, and for that, a red dot is more than enough sight. Now, as we can see how this thing connects into the receiver here, this is not very easy to remove and be able to like maintain everything the way it is. As far as disassembly, I have to take off this shroud in order to be able to disassemble the shotgun completely, which is unfortunate because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's tensioned up against the barrel and all that. So I haven't taken the shotgun apart in a few years. But the great thing about pump action shotguns is that they're fairly reliable to begin with. It's pretty difficult to choke them up with foreign matter and all that kind of stuff. So I am completely fine with letting this go a little bit longer, and then as soon as it does become less smooth or problematic in its function, I'll rip everything apart, clean it very thoroughly, put it back together, and then re-zero it, make sure everything's still good to go. All right, now, of course, this receiver is just like any Mossberg receiver. This is an alloy, and actual lockup with the steel bolt is done into the steel barrel itself instead of anything to do with the receivers, so that way you don't wind up imparting additional stress and potentially destroy your receiver. Now, of course, we do have the ability to be able to remove shells with this little lever right here, should you want to unload the weapon system but don't want to have to sit there and rack it a whole bunch of times. On this side of the shotgun, I have this shell card and this Velcro backing here. Now, these I actually observed for quite a few years before I finally pulled the trigger on getting one. I went through a lot of different options to try to be able to run shells off of a shotgun, because one of the biggest things about being able to effectively run and fight with a shotgun is being able to keep the thing fed. They are laborious to load, and they don't hold very many shells to begin with. So, keeping your shotgun gassed up in a fight is kind of the key thing here. Now, the problem with this particular setup is there's not a whole lot of places to hang shells off of the shotgun itself, especially since I can't necessarily afford rigid options. So things like side saddle shell carriers aren't necessarily going to work with this because this shroud system did not necessarily come with them. So that didn't help out. I had to get there is one that has a side saddle mount, but I would have to completely swap this out and go over to that one. That wasn't really worth the cost to me. In addition to that, with the side folding stock, rigid carriers could potentially give myself a little bit of an issue of being able to actually lock this all the way over the side. This has a little bit of give in it, but we're talking about, hundredths of an inch worth of wiggle room here, where a shotgun shell plus the external carapace that is holding it, the shell holder itself, could potentially cause an issue with that. That was one of the things that I was evaluating early on. Now, with this setup as it is, this is nylon, this is as thin as it can be, and all I have to worry about is the shell rim now, which I've had no issues with still being able to fold the stock over to the side with this thing loaded up with shells. And then the great thing about this is that I can also rip this off once it's empty and then slap a new one on. Actually purchased quite a few of these now so that I can basically run this like some sort of reload. That's one of the other issues with side saddles. So if you empty your side saddle and you want more shells on hand in the side saddle, it's faster to just skip the side saddle at that point, really, and just load the shotgun itself. There's no reason to load a side saddle to load a shotgun. In this case, I can strip this out, I can reach into my already set up kit, pull out another carrier, and slap it on the side. I'm ready to go. I can start taking those off and feeding them in. It's a little bit more streamlined of an action, and I really appreciate that setup. All right, now, our safety is very different from your average Mossberg safety. Generally on Mossbergs, your safety is located on the tang. The Maverick 88 is located right in front of the trigger guard. It is a crossbolt type setup, and I do prefer this placement for shotguns, unlike a Remington 870, which is generally back here. It's more natural to hit the safety and then come back onto the trigger. Now, your slide release is located on this side of the shotgun, and this pistol grip makes it a little problematic to get at this slide release, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, our trigger guard and this lower section down here, our trigger mechanism, is a plastic casing inserted into the receiver of the shotgun, which when it comes to Mossberg style shotguns, it's pretty much the 590s where you get the steel trigger guards or the aluminum trigger guards. All right, now we come back to our stock. So our stock is from ATI, and it is a side folding setup very similar to that which I run on my Mini14, which is also in that truck gun video, as well as it has its own designated video if you guys want to check that out. So it is a side folding telescoping type setup with a thick rubber butt pad on it. Also has a QD cup setup. Big old push button right there too, by the way, which is nice. It's very large, it's very easy to hit and be able to actuate and employ, which I do appreciate. Now, early on I had some issues with this where I had it a little bit more collapsed in because I do like to run my telescoping stocks in a little bit closer. It keeps everything streamlined from when I'm running armor and when I'm not. But one of the issues with that was whenever I would get down on the shotgun, this would come back and poke me in the nose with recoil, which was not terribly fun. So I would wind up having to kind of adjust my head a little bit back on the stock. And if I'm mounting this quickly, I'm not thinking about that. So I kind of get punched in the nose every time I shot it. So finally, I just clicked in my head and I realized that all I had to do was just extend the stock a little bit, and then that stopped happening. So that took a little bit longer to figure out than it probably should have. But, you know, hindsight, what can you do? Now, this did come with a cheek riser. However, I see no need to utilize a cheek riser on this particular shotgun. All right, guys, there's our features. How does it shoot?
Want some stuff?
Well, guys, to be completely honest, it shoots like a shotgun. Not a whole lot to talk about there. Let's see, I have it zeroed up with slugs, of course. I've run slugs, buck, turkey shot, bird shot, all kinds of stuff through this. Before I configured it this way, this was actually set up with a 28-inch barrel, and it was my duck gun. I actually took my first duck with it, so I've run steel shot through it. I have run a wide variety and a large amount of ammunition through this shotgun with absolutely no failures, and only slight discomfort with getting punched in the nose. Now, actually, just today, I ran a box of Hornady SST 2 3/4-inch slugs through it. And I've got to say, one of my favorite things about this is this butt pad. Now, this kind of runs us into an interesting discussion here. So my biggest issue with this shotgun, as a truck gun, is that it is long in pretty much every manner that you could conceivably consider it to be long. It is long, it is wide, it is tall, it is all those types of things, which makes it a little bit difficult whenever I'm taking it out of a vehicle and into a hotel. One of my big things about travel and all that kind of stuff, or really daily CCW in general, is that I don't want anyone to know I'm armed. Not because I'm ashamed or I'm doing something wrong, as much as it's that much easier if nobody knows. So be it I'm not telegraphing to my opponent that I'm actually a prepared and armed citizen, and I'm not necessarily making anyone else uncomfortable or treat me any differently because I am armed. It's just easy to just skate through life without anyone even realizing I'm there, ready to be able to defend myself and others should the situation require it. Same thing with long guns, and if anything, people get more nervous around long guns. So the big issue becomes, how is it exactly do I transport this into a hotel whenever I'm taking this on long drives? It's difficult to say the least. I do have a Vertex bag, a garment bag setup that I utilize with my short-barreled rifle and my IWI Fore. The problem is, this doesn't fit. It's too fat, it's too deep, all those types of things. It takes up entirely too much space. It will not fit in that bag. Especially since with shotguns, we're kind of stuck up against 18-inch barrels at a minimum. We can't go any shorter without it being an NFA item, and that kind of makes the cross borders thing a little bit difficult when you do that. So I've got to kind of stick with this 18-inch barrel. Now, I do have this random bag that used to be for transporting light equipment that I can transport the shotgun in. It doesn't necessarily telegraph itself that way. However, it is an entirely additional bag that isn't carrying any other type of garment or anything like that. It's a lot of extra stuff to tote around. I have shoved this into my travel bag before, my rolly bag. However, that's something in order for this to be accessible during the drive. And that's a whole additional thing I have to do once I reach the parking lot. That's a lot of potential for discovery, I guess you could say. That might put me in a situation where I'm letting someone know that I have a firearm available, and they might try to make an issue out of that one way or another. So that's one of the issues that I've noted with this shotgun overall. Now, some things that I could do to make it a little bit more compact would be things like perhaps a more skeletonized side folding or even top folding stock. Now, a couple issues with those. One, if I go top folding, I lose my optic, and I don't really want to lose my optic. This is both my night fighting capability, or a part of my night fighting capability, as well as my faster side acquisition capability. In addition to that, if I go with the more skeletonized stock, I lose a lot of recoil management. Now, I've never been particularly recoil shy when it comes to 12 gauge and smaller shotguns. Like as a young child, or young man, I guess I should say, I jumped into 12 gauges with no real issue and haven't ever really backed down from them. However, especially when you start talking about defensive loads and stuff like that, these are quite stout. And with that being the case, there's a couple things you got to take into account with that. Specifically in training, in recoil management in an actual combat environment, heavy recoil, if you're actually in a fight, may not necessarily be something that you notice. It might be something that you push through. However, in the train up for that fight, you might start developing flinches and stuff like that, which are bad habits. You want to train those out any opportunity that you can. You still eventually have to practice with full power ammo, though. You can't always get away with it's like carrying a .357 Magnum revolver. If you intend to carry .357 Magnums in it, you need to train with those .357 Magnums. You need to work on recoil management with those .357 Magnums. You can't lure yourself into a false sense of security with .38 Special all the time, especially a lot of light target loads. At some point, you got to step that up and work on that management and try to avoid developing that flinch. This is the same type of deal. And that is why I preferenced having a beefy buttstock recoil pad on this shotgun. And this is something that most definitely will not change. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular shotgun. Now, one thing I do want to bring up, guys, the next year for me is going to be, right now we're at the close of 2021. The next year for me is going to be pretty hectic, and I'm probably going to wind up having some gaps in coverage on the YouTube channel. With that being the case, I've now established a Facebook group for the YouTube channel. It is Murph's Law on Facebook. I'll throw a link in the description. You guys, if you're interested in this content, you want to be able to maintain some sort of connection with the channel as I come in and out of accessibility over the next year, then you guys should totally hop onto the Facebook group and say hi. All right, guys, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.